Welcome back. This is still TV3 News. It's time to talk about gender-based violence. In actual fact, let me give you some statistics before we even take a look at a story that we've put out. Now, as at August 2020, statistics put out by DOSU indicated that about 31.9% of the female population had reported issues regarding gender-based violence. They had reported being violated based on their gender. And if we look at the total population, we're about almost 32 million. And the female population represents 49.1%. And so if we do 41.9%, that's like 15.6 million women or girls or female population in the country. Now, if 31.9% of these women have been violated based on the statistics put out by DOSU, that represents almost 5 million females in the country who have been violated either sexually, emotionally, physically, and so many other things as well. And it's very worrying, knowing especially that the country in 2007 also passed the Domestic Violence Act to criminalize domestic violence in the country, and yet we're still recording such high numbers. And that should tell you that that's not even all, because in the rural areas and in many other parts of the country, it goes unreported because of fear of stigma, because we don't have the support system for these women and these girls in the country, and so many other things as well. Inequality, we all do understand our patriarchal system. So it's very worrying that even in 2021, we're still reporting this. And it's not just Ghana, globally as well. We're told that 1 out of every 3 women is violated, either sexually, physically, or even more. And so it's one of the main violations of human rights globally. And it's necessary that we also find ways to address the situation. Many institutions have, profit solutions as to how it can be addressed. The UN, USAID, they're looking at more local content and localized ways of trying to, reorient women and people in society so we can do better. And some are even saying that maybe it's time to educate the children, both boys and girls, so they can respect each other and do better to support each other with regards to these things. Have we done enough? Let's take a look at a story that's been put out, and after that, I'll introduce you to my guest for today. As for that, we'll try and play that story shortly, but I have my guest in the studio. We might as well go ahead and have this conversation. So I have in the studios right now Lillian Bruce, and she's a gender specialist at Plan Ghana International. Good morning. Good morning. And you're welcome, Lillian. I like your hairstyle, I must say. And then also in the studios, I have Oko Ama. Oko Ama is a member of the African Youth and Adolescents Network on Population and Development, and you're both working together on what we're about to discuss. Hold on, let's take a look at that story quickly and then we'll talk.
Statistics show that women and girls are more vulnerable to violence due to cultural and harmful norms, gender inequality, unequal power relationships, and the abuse of power. This affects them physically, socially, and psychologically, and ultimately impacts on their productivity and fulfillment of their full potentials. Experts say many institutions, including schools, workplaces, religious spaces, do not have clear, visible, and accessible mechanisms and structures in place to safeguard girls and women. Also worrying is the fact that some institutions that have these mechanisms are also not effective with enforcement to prevent and reduce the incidents. These institutions also have weak punitive structures to serve as deterrent, therefore promoting the culture of silence, which prevents a lot of women and girls from speaking up and seeking redress when they suffer GBV.
All right, and so Lillian is here, Kwama is here as well, and they're working together on this project on gender-based violence. Lillian, I'll start with you because COVID-19 has disrupted literally every aspect of our lives. And based on the number of lockdowns that many countries have had to encounter and, put in place just to stop the spread, we were told that that also resulted in an increase in the rate of gender-based violence across the world. What's the current situation, especially in Ghana?
Thank you very much
Berla,
for this opportunity, Vera. And thank you also for TV3 for allowing us to talk about these issues. Because I must say that, just as you have put up, in 2016, with all the interventions that NGOs does, we recorded about 27% increment of violence among women. And I'm surprised to hear about the 31%, and we can all
31,
hold
yes.
COVID responsible for that. Because if you take the age that are mostly affected, we look at from age 10 to age 19. And these category of age are the school-going age. And so some statistics put it that even 246 million children, both boys and girls, one way or the other, gets violence or harassed or humiliated or abused, either at school or within school or on their way to school.
Yeah.
So if you take COVID, you realize that the abusers take a different turn with regards to marital or intimate partners abusing their spouses, because the lockdown allowed us to stay together. And so also with the economic pressures, with other people's particularly those that are doing their own businesses, were halted. And so in terms of income, financially, people were constrained, and that also resulted in a lot of abuses. I'm not surprised also, because if you look at the time period, you can also realize that the data on teenage pregnancy went way up. Between the ages of 10 to 14 recording 2,000, and 15 to 19 recording almost 80,000. So that's quite alarming, and it tells you how the abuses and the violence happened during the COVID. Because most of these pregnancies might have resulted through either violence, either rape, or either harassment and all that. So COVID also made it a bit easier for these kind of abuses and harassment to happen.
But the worry, however, is that unfortunately a lot of these cases are going unreported.
Yes.
And not too long ago, I think in March, we were all here when it was alleged that a businessman somewhere in East Legon abused his wife.
Yeah.
And she is not an uneducated person. She is educated. And so you'd expect that she would have spoken out. But she also suffered in silence. And she is even educated and is going through this. How much more those in the rural areas? How much more those without a voice? And so what are we getting wrong with regards to how to tackle this issue?
So thank you very much, Bella. So for instance, that's one of the biggest misconceptions people have, that people who suffer from sexual and gender-based violence or are mainly people who are not necessarily educated because they wouldn't know what to do. But it is our responsibility to educate people to understand the nature of abuse. And gender-based violence is an abuse that can happen anywhere, at the workplace, home, school, everywhere. Even on the street, people are harassing people. So it's how sensitive and like the depth of the issue that we should understand that abuse is no respecter of persons, whether you are educated or not, whether you are in the rural or urban area, no matter what, you can go through abuse.
What is abuse? It's not to cut you, but explain it to us, because someone might think that if I'm only beaten, I'm hit, or I'm killed, then that's abuse. But I'm learning that even when they insult you,
of course, because you are violating the person's human rights, and in a way that you exercise your power over the person. You can even intimidate someone. It makes them uncomfortable for them to even be in a space to be themselves or function as who they are. You understand? And so, for instance, a man and a woman in a relationship, because we've been socialized and thought that you are the man, you do this and that. The man, if the woman does not agree, so some little agreement, the man may be forced to exercise some sort of power or authority over the woman. It's the same with children. Young boy and girl growing, because they've seen things happening around them and they know that I am a boy, I have to do this things a certain way. A girl has to do things a certain way. So if I am a boy and I take your pencil, you don't have to cry or shout because I am the boy, and then fight happens. So it starts from the early age of socialization. That is why for AfriYAN's programming, we look at training peer mentors, look at adolescents or teenagers, where we train them to understand some of these things, and then in their own communities they start discussions with their own peers, because it is actually it is unlikely for a child around that age to even go to the parents to talk about these things, because sometimes they are shut down, but they can tell their friends, somebody touched me in a very uncomfortable way, I don't like it, what do I do? So when the friend is equipped with a lot of this information, they can say, no, you have to report it. Or they know that there's a helpline that you can call for help, or there's a resource, a kit that you can read. When somebody does this to you, it is wrong. Or you can even take the leaflet to your parents and say, Mom, just read this, and engage with their parents as well, because we need to find creative ways of engaging young people and children, especially on how to understand these basic things in a way that when someone is molested or abused, they can find ways to communicate to any responsible adults around them. Once they identify it, then you seek for help. So it's understanding that everybody can be abused, whether you are a man, whether you are a woman, a child, everybody can be abused. And because of the socialization and all of these things, people are not willing to come out to report, because once you report, there's some sort of stigma and all of that, because people would say, okay, this one we can't, as children, you can't play with her, because when you do something, she will report. So there are a lot of things we need to break down, a lot of systems that needs to be broken down for people to understand the message and seek help where they need. And sometimes people think once there is abuse, you report, and then that is it. Sometimes the one who has been abused need a lot of support, like psychosocial support, they need therapy, they need to go through a lot of process to heal. And this doesn't take a day. You understand? So we need systems and resources. So that's why Plan Ghana and AfriYAN are coming together to bring stakeholders, do a lot of media engagement, to let people understand that it's not something that once someone has been abused, they just go and report and that's it. You need to access services. So that's why we are here. I
like that you're renting the children, but the adults are also a major problem. And you said something, report to a responsible adult. Sometimes our own parents are even irresponsible, such that if you even report to them, they'll say, oh, we can't bring this kind of embarrassment onto the family. So if it's an uncle that touched you, in a very uncomfortable way, they want to cover it up, and so they'll say, oh, they're in free court. Let's handle the situation at home. So that's where the problem mostly is. Yes, we're educating the children, but what about these adults who are also covering up some of these crimes?
Okay, so Plan has about 16 ways to end violence against girls and women. And the first one is to raise awareness. Awareness in the way that we kind of, based on our socialization, some of these things, we take them for granted. We don't look at them as abuse. We don't look at them as violence. We don't look at them as harassment. Because all of this, that's why we call it gender-based, because it has to do with the stereotyping, it has to do with unequal power relations, and it also has to do with how we have valued ourselves based on our sexes. And based on that, we need to also unpack some of the harmful practices that goes to work against the girl or the women to be abused sexually, mainly.
But it's not just girls, by the way. Let's just make
the women
that fact,
as well.
And boys. We're told that boys are also abused.
Exactly. But if you take the quantum,
then it's more than male.
It's the girls and the women that are more affected in that way. And the second one was also to tackle the violence against girls in school. And it is estimated that they are harassed, particularly when they are even menstruating, particularly when they kind of don't manage their menstrual hygiene well. Most girls had lost or dropped out from school because of that incident. And I think that it's also time for us to raise such awareness and put structures in place to support these girls in school. One of the things is also for us to challenge and speak out. The culture of silence, we need to break that silence and talk about it. Because if you don't talk about it, your next person will be the victim. So once we continue discussing these on these platforms, it will bring awareness to it. The perpetrators will also know that there's no safe places for them to hide. And so we can be able to end those acts. We can also look at helping girls journey safer to school. And that is why Ministry of Education have in their policies that we should have at least a school accessible within 5 kilometers. And I think all these things help to keep the girls very safe when they are even going to school, because most of the abuses happen either on the way to school as well.
That's arguable, because there are schools that are many miles away from the community. Last week there was even a story about students having to walk 3 hours barefoot to school. How do you protect such a child? So that's a major problem as well. So yes, we're preferring solutions, but are they solutions? Are there things that we can readily make available to the people in society so they can run to that institution and say, I've been abused and this is what society can do for me? That's where the challenge is.
And I really can share in the challenges, because for those of us who work on GBV, on gender-based violence, we are trying to help, but you are also faced with some of these challenges, and that is why for AfriYAN in our work, we make sure, for instance, there is a helpline which is toll-free, launched by the Ministry of Gender and other agencies like UNFPA. So we, in training our peer mentors, we also give them this resource so they should share this with the children. So you even ask, how are we engaging the parents as well? So for instance, because we know we work with teenagers and young people, we also engage with the parents to let them understand the nature of the issue and how their children are even helping to curb these issues in their communities. So the parents are also, you know, engaged so they can understand the nature of the issue at hand. So even though we work with these children in schools, they are also from communities, and they realize that as much as they engage with their peers in schools and all, things happen in the community. So they organize small group discussions and all, and share these resources for these young people who may have been abused to call and seek for help, and how can they do that? And you realize that these are resources that Ministry of Gender and Social Welfare agencies like Plan, AfriYAN, and all these agencies are working together. So in that way, you can see that one person cannot even solve the issue alone. You understand? Because the ministry in itself and its agencies in the regions, even though they are there, through our interventions, these cases are identified, they are reported, and they support these young people with And so there are a lot of activities and other things coming up that we are doing, because it's an ongoing engagement. We'll not stop talking about GBV now because it keeps happening every day.
So what's the ultimate outcome of what you're doing? I'll end with that.
Okay. So the institutional barriers, Plan has done a lot to make sure that the communities that we worked in have what we call the community-based child protection committees. So they are there to make sure that they identify risk issues within the communities and create safe spaces for these risks that they have identified, so that they can keep the girls very safe. Apart from that, Plan is also partnering with AfriYAN, for instance, to be able to create more awareness on these issues at all levels. And also we have what we call the girls' camps in our target communities, where we pull the girls to tell them what it means to have an abuse and what to do when you are harassed or you are violented or you are abused in that manner. So these are some of the steps that we have done to be able to. So we have a week-long program on this gender-based violence that we are partnering with AfriYAN. So I would want AfriYAN to take us through the program.
Okay, let's do that quickly. The time is up. We have
for instance, there is a stakeholder forum tomorrow that is targeted at school-based gender-based violence. But of course, we know other community issues might come out with GES and other stakeholders as well. We are also looking at, we are hitting the streets to educate people on this. So today and tomorrow on Oxford Street to hit there. Also, you are looking at institutions, because when you played the story earlier, you mentioned that it was mentioned that institutions, it happens in workplaces, and institutions are trying to, you know, develop policies and systems to make sure that gender-based violence in these places can be reduced. So the main outcome is increased reporting and reduce, abuse in workplaces and everywhere. So that's exactly what we are doing, and we make sure that we share resources to people. When you need help after the education, you realize that when people are abused, it's a confusing state, so they need somewhere to call. So if you permit me, I'll just mention this helpline. So people,
quickly.
So you can call. It's toll free, no matter the network. Just call and report 0800 111 222 0800 111 222. Just call and report or seek the help that you need if you are going through any form of abuse, because we need to talk about it and we need to prevent it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And yes, indeed, gender-based violence is deleterious to society and its economy. In fact, the World Bank has indicated that some countries are spending as much as 3.7% of their GDP, which is more than double what most governments spend on education, on gender-based violence, and it's very worrying. And so it's good that we're having conversations about this, and I do hope that government as well is doing its very best to also support this cause, as they already have done. I've been speaking to Lillian. Let me quickly just pull up her name. So Lillian Bruce is a gender specialist, Plan Ghana International, and also Francis Okwama is a member of African Youth and Adolescents Network on Population and Development. We have some birthday shout-outs that will come out shortly, but keep watching. This is still TV3 Media.